Howdy kids, welcome to another episode of Escaping the Cave. This is the Toddzilla X-Pod. I'm your friendly and congenial, cordial, lovable, cute, cuddly Mr. Congeniality himself. I'm Todd. How you doing? It's episode number 141. Record date is the early morning hours of July the 25th. We are almost to August of 2024. Hope you're having a good week. It's a bonus episode of sorts. I told you the other day. But as soon as I shut this thing down, I turned off the microphone. I knew there was more I had to say. It's been an eventful, 11 days now? Is that where we're at? It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 12 days. It's been a hell of a 12 days. Yeah. Cheadle finally resigned. Got a little more on that coming up. I'm going to talk about Kamala. Revisionist history, if you will, and you just did. This is my podcast. A little more on Biden, I suppose. And what about this shooter, man? Why is there no information out there on this Crooks guy? Every other time, I mentioned it in the last show, every other time we have one of these things, it's a flood, a veritable flood of information, a biographical deep dive into all of these shooters, just about every time, with one notable exception. Talk about that here in a couple of minutes. Going to talk about the Secret Service and the effects of DEI on hiring. And I did a show. It was a very challenging episode for me to do. This was clear back in 2019 sometime. And there was this phrase in it. It was the Jacques Ellul book that I was talking about. I did that series on it. Back in 2019, and there was a phrase in there called mithridization, and it talks about how that mithridization affects people who are constantly bombarded by propaganda. I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. Thought about doing a Throwback Thursday thing, too. There's an episode back here. It's getting a little bit of attention, again, from 2019. It's episode number 50. And I believe it was released, I want to say October 1st. And it's about agitation and revolutionary hatred. And considering everything that's going on right now, it makes a lot of sense that somebody or some people would go back, they'd see the title of that episode and go back and listen to it. I checked it out a little bit today before I sat down because I thought about maybe cutting it up and using it like a Throwback Thursday kind of thing. Decided not to do it, but go check that out. It's really interesting. It was about the time, I think, of the impeachment. Oh, we got Trump this time. We got him. We're going to finally get him. Stop me if you've heard that phraseology before. We finally are going to get the guy. Right? And I'm sitting here on the show like, really? Are you sure about that? Yeah, you can impeach him, but you got to get through this. You understand how impeachment works, right? We got him, though. No, you didn't. And after Biden decided to finally hang it up this week, all the Democrats have decided that Kamala Harris, after ignoring, do you remember maybe a year ago, where's Kamala? Has anyone seen, do we have a vice president? They were keeping her so far away from the cameras and out of the news because she was so toxic. Nobody likes this woman. Virtually no one. I guess her husband. There's some people that like her, I guess, but her approval ratings are abysmal. Now, ever since Biden got out of the race this week, oh my God, she's the second coming of Christ. Oh, we love her. We love her. There's all these stories on X, these stupid little anecdotes. You know, when you're watching the State of the Union, and the president will be up there, have a little guest, he'll give a little biographical kind of, and then or maybe it's just like a stump speech. Maybe this is a better example. And they'll go out, oh, this farmer came up to me in tears and said, oh, I'm so happy you've done so much for us working for, and he was in tears, and he basically got on his knees and cleaned my feet for all I've done. It's bullshit. X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is ablaze with this kind of shit this week. Oh, well, I got a phone. Oh, no, my favorite, I think, was this. I told my daughter that Joe Biden had dropped out and Kamala Harris was now going to run for president. And my daughter literally cried. I saw this bullshit. That never, ever happened. And if it did, if you've got a 6-year-old daughter who's crying, who worships a fucking politician that much, that young, you probably are a bad parent. Carl's Jr. should take your child away from you. An idiocracy reference for you. But it's amazing. It's incredible. This revisionist history. She was toxic. Nobody wanted anything to do with her a year or two ago. And now, oh, we love Kamala. It's almost like wartime propaganda during a presidential campaign. That's what it reminds me of. Trying to craft and shape and inflate public opinion through this ceaseless onslaught of propaganda. Pro-Kamala propaganda. And the revisionist history, I mentioned that a minute ago. Now, they're trying to tell you that Kamala had nothing to do with the border. She was not put in charge of the border by Joe Biden. They're all over the place saying that she had nothing. It's not her fault. She had nothing to do. That's a lie. That's just spin. Disinformation. Despite the fact that just about every outlet out there has it in their archives. All you got to do is go back and look for it. Axios literally called her the border czar. People went and found it 10 minutes after Axios posts to Twitter that she was never in charge of the border. Their own material, their own links. The internet is kind of like it's forever, you know. Yeah. The Associated Press, who's supposed to be one of the last reputable news outlets there, did the same thing. The same thing. So they're saying now Kamala had nothing to do with the border this whole time. This whole time. We just imagined it, fabricated it. And then, beyond that, the DEI hire thing, of course, conservatives. People like me, even. I still consider myself a little left of center, just a tiny, it's getting less every week, it feels like. But like me, many, many people are calling her a DEI hire, a DEI appointment. Well, that's sticking. And it's causing perceptual problems, it sounds like, for the Democratic elite. So now they're really trying to push back on that and say Joe Biden never, ever, ever pledged to appoint a DEI person into the vice president. Again, it's all out there. But they would like you to believe, and they would like to tell you that you imagined all of this. We have always been at war with Eurasia, I guess. It's Orwellian. It is Orwellian. Do not believe your eyes and ears. Believe what the party tells you to believe. It's had a couple of days to sink in now, so people have gotten out and kind of talked to people, done some polling, I guess. And the polling this week, it's all over the damn place. I've seen everything from Trump being up like 12 to Kamala being up by 2. Nobody knows. Nobody has any real good information on this. But this is the initial euphoric stage. This is like they've just started dating Kamala Harris for real. You know, they just got out of this bad relationship with this stubborn old man who wouldn't do what they wanted, couldn't drive the car, had to take him everywhere. Now, they finally kicked him to the curb and they've got a new date. They've got somebody else, somebody younger, somebody new, somebody fresh. And now they're in the euphoric, exciting initial stages of this new relationship, and everybody's, oh, and she's so great. She's so great. If you've ever dated anybody, if you're not an incel, you know how this goes. A couple of weeks, yeah, it's great. Then, oh my God, you start to see it. You start to see the warts. Maybe she's a little naggy. You know, maybe he drinks too much. Maybe he's still hung up on his ex. Maybe she's got this twitch, this insipid mannerism that you just can't stand. Maybe she chews with her mouth open. Maybe he farts at the table. You're overlooking it right now. It's okay because it's new and it's fresh and it's exciting in about 2 weeks. This isn't going to be so new, so fresh, and so exciting anymore. You're going to remember who Kamala Harris was. Despite the fact that they hid her from you for the better part of 4 years, she was there before. She's the one who couldn't get one delegate in the primary before the 2020 election. She's the one that nobody could stand. I've got audio archived. I'm going to do something with it at some point. I might do like a little piece of production. She has this like produced video, I think, put together saying how equity and equality are not the same. And we really, really, really need equity. She was putting together bail money for the BLM rioters, arsonists, and vandals back in 2020. She's going to try to come across as a law and order candidate, the prosecutor against the felon. Don't get fooled. You're not going to get fooled. You're not stupid. You've been around this. You've seen her. You've heard her words already. You know who and what she is. She's the DEI Trojan horse. She is the symbol figure for diversity, equity, and inclusion and exclusion. She is the one who's supposed to personify, signify the end of merit, qualifications, being skilled in this country in deference to identity qualities. What sex you are, what race you are, how oppressed you've been. Oh, how oppressed you've been by these evil white men. Oh, that's who Kamala Harris is. That's who she's always been. She is a Trojan horse. Nobody voted for her. You've got all these delegates now. She is the presumptive nominee. She can't be the official nominee until the convention next month, right? Yeah, so she's going to be the presumptive nominee. How does this work? Why did we even have a primary? All of these people went out and voted for Joe Biden. But now the delegates are just going to get behind Kamala Harris. Who voted for her? Why are we voting? Why not? Why are we having the primary in the first place? If they can just do that, go choose who they want anyway. Well, what's the point? Why are we spending all this money on a campaign? Why are we spending all this money on a primary, putting out a primary? Count the votes. So the media can have a masturbatory March Super Tuesday event? Is that it? Because if they nominate her and nobody voted, the vote was pointless. She is being anointed. I know it's late in the game. That's their fault. It's their own damn fault. What are we, 4 months away from the election? Not even, right? July, August, September, October, 3.5 months. Oh, it's too late. Well, this is your own fault. Get it done anyway. Had you had an open primary in the springtime, then you wouldn't be in this situation. Failure to plan on your part is not an emergency on our part. It's not an excuse either to shove a DEI enema up the country's rear. No, I'm not a fan. Never been a fan of hers, and I am becoming less and less. I didn't know it was possible. I wasn't sure it was possible. I knew I was becoming less enamored with the Democrats. I have been since 2017, I guess. But every year, I feel like it gets worse. And I don't understand how there is not outrage among Democrats. I do not, maybe I do. Maybe I do understand the herd think, the mob mentality of just jumping in line, doing what everyone else is doing and what they say should be done. Or maybe you're just drunk. Maybe you're just drunk with delirious. Maybe it's a better word. Having the fevered dream, the fevered anti-Trump dream. How badly he just needs to lose regardless of the means. The means. Ends justify the means. No matter what. It doesn't matter that the millions of people who got out there and took the time to go vote for geriatric Joe basically are having their votes thrown away. What would have happened if Kamala Harris was on that ballot against somebody like RFK Jr. or God knows who else would have came forth and ran in that primary? Who knows what would have happened? It's hard to say. We'll never know now. But we should. So, yeah, I'm not a fan. But I got to say, it's been amazing, the propaganda onslaught this week. Completely ignoring her, hiding her away for most of Biden's term, and now she's some weird combination of, I don't know, Georgette Washington, Natasha Guevara, and Arya Stark. She's going to go out and save a woman's right to choose. She's going to fight the White Walkers. Ah! And then there's Biden. Oh, my God. After rightly chastising him as a diminished old man whose ego was too stubborn to let him leave the campaign, they've all but nominated this man for political sainthood now. Oh, he's a hero. He loves his country. He's doing a heroic thing. Somebody, was it MSNBC or The View? I don't remember. Compared what he's doing here this year to George fucking Washington. Well, George Washington gave up power too. It's the same. Oh my God. Oh my fucking God. Stop. Please. And he finally got on television last night. Primetime address to the nation. I watched 2 minutes of it. But where was he before that? The supposed leader of the free world was not seen at all, for a week. Something felt just off about that whole thing. It was so weird that the conspiracy theories started up and started claiming that he was either dead or in hospice. I saw this all over the place, that Biden was in hospice care and he was not expected to survive the night. Was that Tuesday? Something like that. I half expected him to resign last night during what turned out to be this big primetime nothing burger. Basically a combination Kamala campaign plug / proof of life exhibit. That's all that was. There's nothing to it. Now, as I said, we're almost 2 weeks out past the attempt on Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. We've got new footage. We've got some more details, at least about the assassination attempt. I'm starting to seep through the cracks a little bit, but there is still virtually nothing about the shooter himself. This reeks of the motive blackout. We're still experiencing after the trans thing, whatever that trans thing shot up that school in Nashville. After writing its manifesto, we're not allowed to see that manifesto. We are not allowed to be shown the actual motives for that shooting in Nashville. It feels like it's being sort of swept under the carpet in the same way, doesn't it? There's nothing. Is this guy a ghost? Was he a phantom? A phantasma? Was he just sort of conjured into existence that day? He didn't have a life before this? It's bizarre. It's creepy, and it's incredibly suspicious to me. This lack of information. I've seen a lot of people who are speculating without really too much reliable evidence that this Thomas Crooks guy was transgender. And that they're, again, withholding the information, the motive information from the country, because it would reflect poorly on this latest protected and favored species, trans people. And might, God forbid, shine a spotlight back on the very real fact that these folks aren't suffering from euphemistic dysmorphia. They're mentally fucking ill. Seen posts and pictures circulating around online asking why this guy's official media headshot, the picture we all see, is from his 8th grade year. – claiming it's because, Crooks was trans. – 'cause, 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 'c It would reflect poorly upon the poor community. Oh, this oppressed community that's just starting to shoot up schools and, take shots at presidential candidates. Is that the case? No? Well, are you sure? You could prove it. Give us something. Show us something, or else you're just going to let this informational anarchy vacuum is going to start to spawn off its own theories. The longer we go with nothing on this, the more likely I am to believe something down this line, because it's weird. There's too much demand for information. It's too big of a news story. It's too big of a story that would drive too much of a ratings increase to be kept silent like this. You know what's funny? Ever since Biden dropped out on Sunday, it's like this assassination attempt almost never happens. Fox News is covering it, but nobody else is really talking about this anymore, are they? Not much. I called it the Serve Pro media, like it never even happened. It's just been scrubbed. Was it too much of an advantage for Trump? Is that what it was? Is that why we're getting this propaganda onslaught, to try to take the spotlight away from the fact that somebody tried to kill a presidential candidate? And what, the DEI appointee is a better story, a better feel-good story, a better narrative, a better thing with which to distract the public? Now, this is it's weird. Or is it? I don't know. Whenever we have these shootings, school shootings, mass shootings, it's always the next shiny thing, right? I never would have thought that would have applied to an assassination attempt, but here we are. Squirrel, squirrel. It's bizarre. Had some congressional hearings this week, and that Cheadle woman, that's all I'm going to call her, Cheadle, testified before Congress, subjected herself to a bipartisan bludgeoning on Monday. It was glorious. AOC was ripping into her. I saw people that loathe AOC who were actually saying, well, you know what? Thanks. Thanks for asking some good questions. Bipartisan. Tearing in to this woman. And guess what? No answers. Virtually no answers. Just platitudes, cliches, canned responses. No commitment toward accountability for what's shaping up to be one of the biggest colossal failures in this country's history as far as security and intel and all that stuff goes, as far as protecting Donald Trump. Again, this was so bad, and there is so little information on this, so little that it's hard to keep the inside job conspiracy theories bottled up. A lot of people really believe this. A lot of people believe it with all their heart, that Cheadle, his first name Kimberly, who gives a shit what her first name is, Cheadle, was in on this, that the entire Secret Service was in on it, or that Crooks was sort of a patsy, lured in, was told he was going to be given protection, got 8 shots off before the Secret Service took him down. How did that happen? Why was nobody on that roof? I would have known to put somebody on that roof. Don't give me the shit about a sloped roof stuff. No, I don't want to hear it. I would have known. I would have known to have someone on a goddamn water tower. How does this not happen? This is the most elite security team in the country, supposedly, charged with protecting presidents and candidates. And somehow they don't know to cover a roof 150, 200 yards away from the stage. They didn't keep Trump off stage when they knew that this guy was out there. How does this happen? No answers. God, that's not acceptable. Did you see the video where they had a couple of senators chasing her either through an airport or down some hallways or something, demanding that they answer questions, and she just clammed up, bloop, 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 walked away? Yet, through all of this, she never got fired. She was never terminated. Does this make sense to you? Would this make sense in any sane world? in the country you and I knew growing up in our younger days, would any of this have flown? How was this woman not fired immediately? Fired the first time, as she dodged very direct questions about what happened that day in Pennsylvania. The first time she says, "I don't know," you're fired. How is that possible? In some respects, it would be more comforting to know that there was a conspiracy, rather than acknowledging that this government-wide DEI infestation is, in fact, the gateway to amateurish incompetence that we all thought it would be. I would feel almost better about that. Like I said earlier, a few months back, when Dementia Joe was really starting to show his cracks, right? I was like, you know what? Well, what happened during the State of the Union? Was he on meth? You know what? Maybe he's got a meth lab in the basement. I would feel better knowing that Joe Biden had a meth lab, the official White House meth lab, starring Walter White. I would feel better about that than having to think that this shell of a human being was actually where the buck stopped. You with me? I would feel better if I knew that this was a conspiracy, intentional, than have to imagine or think or believe that our government is becoming this incompetent because of its adherence to an identity cult. We've seen videos, all seen videos of the woman who looks like Pat from SNL struggling with her gun, can't get the gun down there. Got a woman who looks like she's about 5'2", trying to stand in front of Trump just after he was nicked by a bullet, leaving the top 2 feet of his body, including his head, exposed. What the fuck is this woman doing on that team? Tell me. You don't need to tell me. We already know. We're being treated like we're so goddamn stupid. She's really qualified. No. She's physically unqualified. She's not qualified. It's even better. She's diverse. And there are some places where it's incredibly important, beyond important, that merit is the only qualifying factor. You have got to be qualified. You have got to be able to do your job to a certain standard or better, regardless of where you lie on some subjective and imaginary oppression scale. It's never going to be just your turn. The Secret Service, Special Forces, a lot of military. You know, if you're a florist, I guess. Yeah, maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe there's some jobs, well, okay, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to make a huge difference. The United States Secret Service is not one of those meaningless organizations where merit has no effect on anything. Neither is the job of President of the United States. Neither is the job of President of the United States in a democracy, a supposed democracy where we choose our leaders, starting with the primary process, starting with a bunch of candidates that we get a chance to vote on to see who gets put on the ballot so we can all vote against whoever or for whoever. This other DEI enema is being shoved right up that rear end toward the election, toward the ballot, the battle box. God, the battle box. I could have sworn he said battle bots. Remember that show? Anyway, Tuesday, Cheadle finally fell on her accountability sword. Finally. Was she fired? Of course not. Despite all of this, despite everything that has happened, everything that happened that day in Pennsylvania, everything that's happened in the intervening days in almost 2 weeks, she still was never fired. She had to resign. resigned under immense pressure. Why wasn't she just not given the opportunity? Why wasn't she just removed? Why wasn't she replaced by someone competent? We still have an election going on. We still have presidential candidates. Was she still in charge of all of that for the last 2 weeks? How? Why? Because they can't fire the golden DEI calf. Can't do it. That could and would be seen by millions as a diversity and inclusivity failure. Be seen as the diversity and inclusivity failure it was. Despite her epic failure, the woke flake mob would scream sex discrimination top of their lungs while they're out burning American flags protesting Netanyahu. There's a comp here. If you're a baseball fan, perhaps you've heard of Angel Hernandez. For years, and I mean years, he was far and away the worst umpire in Major League Baseball. He may have been the worst official in all of sports. Entire websites, entire social media channels are dedicated to his incompetence. Examples abound every single time. Every game that he was behind the plate, specifically, particularly, and especially, every game. You'd have these examples of how bad of an umpire Angel Hernandez was. He became famous for his incompetence. He should have been fired during the George Bush years. But, what's his name? Angel Hernandez, right? Or Angel Hernandez, maybe? And MLB has shackled itself to the DEI kraken. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't fire him. Angel Hernandez had actually sued them before for racial discrimination when he was passed over for better umpires to work the postseason. He had already started litigating. They were afraid of the PR, afraid of the black eye, afraid to, whatever. Who cares what they were afraid of? What they were not afraid of was having an incompetent umpire, blackening, soiling, staining their game every time he went behind the plate. Just like Cheadle this week, they finally got Angel Hernandez to, quote-unquote, retire. I'm sure he got a nice little parachute to jump out of that plane. And he's finally out of baseball. Players, fans, even some writers, professional writers, rejoiced. That's the comp here. They can't fire her. They could not be seen firing the DEI sacred cow. What about the other ones? What about the woman who was fumbling with her gun? Is she still on staff? Is there an aptitude review, a review process? Umpires go through that. Secret Service people, let me see you put your gun on your hip. Maybe not. Maybe the boys have to go through it, but maybe there's a different standard for the girls. It would be worth it to me almost, as a sole issue, to vote for Donald Trump so all of that shit can be plunged out of the governmental toilet. It's absurd. And here's something a little controversial for you, right down that line. I don't know if it's a popular opinion or an unpopular opinion. I think with people that are speaking publicly, all right, people that want to be seen given their opinion, this is going to be, or seem to be, a very unpopular opinion. But I think, I'll bet you, if I could get authentic surveys done, I'll bet you the majority of the country would agree with me that this, having the DEI sacred cows, the untouchables, who can't be fired, can't be held accountable because they come from a protected species or race, or gender, or mental illness class. But I personally, if I were ever in a position where I owned a business, owned a company, and I needed help, and I needed to hire somebody, I don't think I would hire a minority. It's not out of racism. I'd be afraid that I'd be stuck with these people this person, whoever it is, like a raging case of diversity herpes if they prove to be lazy or incompetent. Once they're in, I couldn't get rid of them without being sued. Why would I subject myself to that? Hiring a minority these days has become like joining an inclusion cult or checking into the Hotel California. Again, I know that's a controversial viewpoint. I know you're not supposed to say that part out loud. But I promise you, if you could get deep down into the minds, the authentic shadow self minds of this country, I'll bet you, some kind of majority of the people would agree with that. And if that's the case, maybe you don't hear it because, oh my God, it's been suppressed. It's been beaten down. The voice, the opinions have been beaten down into the ground. Everybody's afraid to stand up and say something because they're afraid of being canceled. It's one of the nice things about having an unmonetized podcast. Cancel it, bitch. But just ask yourself this. Do you think it's had at least a small dampening effect on the hiring of minorities? And if it has, can you blame people? Can you really honestly blame these folks, people who are just trying to run an efficient business with the best people? Why would anybody risk being saddled with equity-induced flesh garbage that you can't take out to the curb without the threat of litigation and media condemnation? Why would you? It's beyond me. I don't know why you do that. You can't get rid of them. If they suck, they're lazy. You can't get rid of them. And a lot of these folks know it. They know once they're in the door, they can't get rid of me. They have to do something so egregious that the job entitlement, the positional entitlement, would be revoked. A couple other things for you. I think it was at the end of the last episode. I think it was the end. I talked about the end war people, the hippies who are always out there screaming, end war, give peace a chance. You know, these freaks. How ridiculous they were. How they really just irritate me. I got to think a little bit more about this, and there was something that I wrote in my own journal back there a while ago about the arrogance and the narcissism, the self-righteousness of these people who scream end war, especially in the context of who and what we are as a species. Considering our history and considering human nature itself, the end war crowd, they see themselves as the ones sent to evolve the species in what they consider their own self-righteous image. They see themselves as so very virtuous that they believe they were divinely created to craft a kind of psychological eugenics program in order to mutate the entire species and mutate the entire species into something they personally approve of. Pure Jonestown cultist thinking. Of course it is, but it's also the height of authoritarianism. Think about this for a minute. I know this sounds weird. I know it's a little off in another direction maybe you haven't considered, but it's also the height of authoritarianism because with the eugenics experiment comes the implication that the end war crowd know what's best for everyone and should be in charge of these people. If you're in a position to end war, to evolve and edit the species, to engage in this species-wide eugenics program where you can psychologically edit the masses, then you are saying you specifically are in a position to decide what's best for everyone, how everyone should think, how everyone should behave. And in short, that you should be in charge. It's another side path on that long and delusional march toward being unburdened by what has been, toward what can be. See, this shit already has a name. It's word salad. It's euphemistic. There's a more direct way to say this. Heaven. Utopia. Jonestown thinking. They see themselves as earthborn gods who know the way home to the promised land. Is there anything on this green earth more self-righteous than declaring yourselves the anointed ones? End war. Oh my God. Where's it at? Is it this one? What else you got in mind? Oh, you think you can just, psychologically manipulate the species to breed war out of us? What else you going to do? What else you want to crack us over the head with? What other indoctrination programs you got? What other re-education programs do you have? Huh? Thomas Sowell and Steven Pinker talked about this. Steven Pinker in Blank Slate. And Sowell has a couple of different books. What is it? The Vision of the Anointed in Conflict of Visions. Conflict of Visions, he talks about the tragic and utopia visions. Tragic and utopian visions. If you have a tragic vision of human beings, if you see them as flawed, you're more likely to be conservative, religious, at least Christian. And if you have a utopian vision, this is the Rousseau shit where we're all noble savages, we're all divine, destined to evolve into Star Trek. Which it's already there. We're already the noble savage. If we could just strip away all of this evil society stuff and conditioning, we're just going to go back to dancing with fucking wolves. Fuck you. We'll start living in balance with nature. Stop it. Stop that. I can't. No, I just can't with these people. I've got a unique history with the travel stuff. I've been around these folks enough. I can't. I'm not going to do that anymore. They're crazy. They're nuts. It's the height of narcissism. These are the most narcissistic people that I have ever seen. The most self-righteously narcissistic people I've ever seen, I should say. All right, one more thing. I mentioned this mythritization thing that I found from Jacques Ellul out of his book Propaganda, little series that I did back in 2019. Still plan on getting back to it at some point. Haven't yet. Anyway, mythritization. Never heard of it. And here's the definition as far as Wikipedia goes. It's the practice of protecting oneself against a poison by gradually self-administering non-lethal amounts, building a tolerance. You get a mythritization or mythritism, I can't ever pronounce it. You get it when you drink. If you drink on a regular basis, you build a tolerance. Ellul put this in the context of propaganda, saying that people, when they're exposed, constantly exposed to steady streams of propaganda, they will develop some kind of a tolerance. It becomes harder and harder to, affect these folks, to influence them, to call them to action, to create the proselytes and militants. You have to keep at it. You have to keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. And once I wrapped up the other day, I got to, he wrote that book in 1965, as I've said a million times. Things have changed drastically. He was talking about television and radio and print media. Now, in the internet age, when, as I keep saying, information and propaganda, spin, disinformation, all of it, the manipulation travels at the speed of light. And now, artificial intelligence is starting to create some of it. What is our tolerance? Now, if we were to jump in a little time machine and go back to 1965, imagine, let's go back to 1925, at the dawn of radio, before it had really started to mature. We probably would think we were living in a propaganda-free paradise compared to what it is that we deal with now. And if that's the case, and I think it is, I think people are unwittingly, accidentally becoming more effective at using it. Monkey see, monkey do. But I think they're also becoming a lot more skeptical and a lot more sophisticated when it comes to recognizing it. Because it's always there. Mithridization. You build a tolerance to the bullshit. I think this is what's driving, at least in part, the division, the distrust in politicians, the distrust in the media. Nobody trusts them. We've started to be able to see through all of the bullshit because it's always there. We've got a tolerance now. We recognize it because we engage in it ourselves. It's the Manchurian propaganda stuff I talked about. You see it, you see it, you see it. You recognize it. Maybe you don't analyze it, but you notice it. Then you start doing it yourself. And pretty soon it becomes second nature. That was social media 5 years ago. Still is on Twitter. So if that's the case, if that's true, just a working theory, I don't know. But if it is true, who is left to be converted? And how are you going to reach them? Who are you going to convince? Who are these mythical independents? Are there really independents left? Are there really people out there who are free agents? Who are listening to propaganda A and propaganda B and trying to decide which way to go? How many are there? I've always been real dubious of the claim of independent. I'm one of the very few people that I know of. Ha ha ha, toot, toot, toot. Well, I could vote either way. I could vote for a Democrat and have, and I could vote for Donald Trump this year. I guess I am undecided. So, maybe I shouldn't be so judgy. I guess if there's me, there are probably millions of others. But I'm not being convinced. I'm not being drugged one way or the other, I don't think. Simply by propaganda, simply by turning on the television or cracking open social media and digesting the other team's information. I wish MSNBC all the luck in the world at getting me to support Rashida Tlaib or AOC. Bernie. Good fucking luck with that. By the same token, there really is no point in trying to convince a lot of people to give up the Democrats and come vote for Donald Trump. No amount of propaganda is going to get that done. No amount of PR. I don't care. You could have a goddamn convention a week. You're not going to bring those people home. It might have worked 50 years ago, 100 years ago. You might have been able to do that because people they didn't have that kind of tolerance that we do to propaganda, spin, and disinformation, all of that. The psychological manipulations. Again, I ask this, is there anyone out there who's not so inundated by propaganda consciously and subconsciously aware of it in the other team? Okay? Talked about this. Much easier to see in the other guy than our own. But is there anybody out there that doesn't instantly recoil and then strike back, retaliate when they hear this, that, or some other informational heresy? Outside propaganda. Enemy propaganda. Is there an MSNBC viewer out there who will sit in front of Hannity and consider what he has to say? Really consider it. Open himself to being convinced. Let's just say I'm skeptical. Now, if we've built this tolerance, if we've been mithridized, I know that's not a word, sorry. But no, if we've been exposed to it enough and so much that we're getting a little more sophisticated, having a bit more of a tolerance, you would think. And that would be a good thing, right? Immunizing the masses to spin. You think that would be a good thing, right? Until you think forward another step. If that's the case, how do you ever put Humpty Dumpty back together again? Because with this tolerance, with this increased sophistication and awareness of psychological manipulation to try to convince you to do this, that, and the other thing, comes what I've called a much-needed skepticism, cynicism. In order to effectively protect yourself from this stuff, you've got to be cynical. You have to assume that everybody out there, or almost everybody out there, at least of the people that you don't know, that you don't already trust, you have to assume that these people are trying to sell you something, trying to deceive you somehow, manipulate you. So how do you do it? How do you put Humpty Dumpty back together again? How do you take these 330 million pieces of Humpty Dumpty, the star-spangled Humpty Dumpty, how do you glue them back together again? Because he has become so distrustful of everything outside of his own sphere, outside of his own group, outside of his own echo chamber, that he sees the objective informational reconstructive glue as propaganda and disinformation. It could be objectively true. It could be the one thing, the rhetorical elixir, the magic rhetorical potion that puts us all back together again. They won't listen to it. They won't believe it. How do you do it? I don't know. That's a scary thought, though. You can build such a tolerance that even the good stuff, even the positive stuff, even the truth won't reach you. Then what are you supposed to do? Pray? You a praying guy? Oh, dear Lord in heaven, please. Let us see the truth and put us back together again, oh Jesus, please. Thoughts and prayers appreciated. Episode number 141. It's in the books. Thanks for clicking in. Hoping to get another one out next week. This one kind of came together at the last minute. Hope you enjoyed it. Check it out on Substack, Tonzilla X over there, Tonzilla X at YouTube as well. I'm going to try to get a few more of these videos put up. What else do I have? I've got the Twitter account at Tonzilla X Pod. I think I am going to change the name of this thing at some point. That's over there on the X. Got a Facebook page too. I wouldn't recommend that. Have a great weekend, kids. We'll talk to you next time. So long.